Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Talking Freight, the weekly series put out by Ceresys, a third-party logistics company who specializes in transportation management solutions with technology and services. As you know, if you've watched previous episodes of Talking Freight, each week we give shippers a little bit of advice, some best practices, and tips that they can take back to their own departments and improve immediately. As you know, efficiency helps lower costs, and the more you know, the more you are able to be efficient. So let's get back to our ongoing series around inbound freight. This week, we're going to focus on the 8 inbound freight objectives. And so what does that mean? Well, what we're really talking about is the value of managing inbound freight a little bit better. A lot of shippers, unfortunately, look at inbound freight as simply something they have to deal with, and not as a strategic area that they can improve in order to gain more control and lower overall costs. They often have to go to their boss and say, hey, I'm sorry we've spent too much money, but we just feel powerless because our vendors are calling the shots. Well, as a shipper, you can put together an inbound freight program where you feel in more control, and that allows you to affect outcomes, increase efficiency, and lower costs. So when you're putting together a program and you're putting together any strategy, it should be objective or outcome-based. But what are those objectives in inbound freight that you should be taking a look at? So let's go over the top 8 today that you can start thinking about as you put your inbound freight strategy together. And if you're looking for any other tips when it comes to inbound freight, watch our first few in this series by going to our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our future ones coming up in the next few weeks. So what's Objective 1? Well, Objective 1 is something that we've talked quite a bit about when it comes to managing your freight. And every shipper has this goal. It's reducing costs. When you put together an inbound freight strategy, you no longer have to worry about having your costs dictated by the vendor. You can put together a program and work with all of your vendors, maybe consolidate some of that freight, look for efficiencies, and in that, your main objective is to lower costs. The next objective is improvement in on-time deliveries. The more visibility, the more control, and the more collaboration you have with vendors, when you focus on an inbound freight management program, the more you're going to improve getting your materials on time. You may need a lot of your materials as a distributor in order to meet your customers' orders. Or perhaps your manufacturing manager is curious about when material is going to come in so he can make that new product. Number 3, that leads into on-time deliveries, reduction in purchasing lead times. Now, purchasing has certain objectives that they want to make. You have objectives that you want to make. And if you don't have much control or visibility in working with vendors, you don't have a really good ability to communicate how long it's going to take for you to get your product and to get your end product shipped to your customer. So an objective should be reducing your purchasing lead times. Number 4, less handlings and damage. If you get more control by working with vendors in a collaborative way, or even being a part of how they ship it to you and maybe dictating that through a routing guide, well, you can decrease the amount of handlings of your freight and therefore not have to worry about things such as timely freight claims or maybe losing money because one of your assets was damaged. Number 5, having an inbound freight program also allows you to lower inventory levels and reduce carrying costs. If you have a very solid, confident inbound freight program, your lead times are short, you have less handlings and damage, and you have more on-time deliveries, well, you don't have to have as much inventory on hand. A lot of the times, people invest a lot of capital expenditures into inventory because they may not feel confident that they're going to receive product on time in order to get it to meet customer demand. Now, you may have heard about just-in-time deliveries, and a lot of companies are going that way, sometimes called lean, and you can only really effectively execute that kind of program if you have confidence in an inbound freight program. Number 6, this is a little bit about control, providing max visibility. This allows you to provide a better customer experience to your customers because you feel confident that the material you're receiving from vendors is arriving in your distribution center, your facility, and you're able to say with confidence to the customer that they will have their product at a specific time. You're able to see things like the accounting options in inbound freight and control that a little bit better with different auditing so you can save money there. And just that overall visibility allows you to stay out of the process of the weeds of things and have a more strategic, collaborative relationship with your vendors and therefore also your carriers as you become more involved in that process. Number 7, improvement in warehouse productivity. This goes a lot into on-time deliveries and reducing lead times. If you have more confidence when your freight is going to show up in your warehouse, you can properly assemble your team and assign staff to be where they need to be, whether it's picking or just unpacking the delivered freight into different pieces and sorting that information. You can tell your warehouse staff exactly when their freight is going to arrive and what they need to do. Otherwise, you're dependent upon when it shows up, it shows up. And that's just not good business, and it's hard to stay proactive and control your staff in order to reduce costs. And then finally, this is a big one, and we've talked about this quite a bit, weaved into all of these objectives, is increased customer service. Now, there's outbound customers, which I call those people you're shipping your product to. And of course you want to make them happy. They pay your bills, they order your product. But if you can't tell them confidently when their stuff's going to show up, or if you just don't have it yet because you don't have very good visibility or control in inbound freight, well, your customer's not going to like that. And it's very easy for them to jump ship and find somebody who can give them that information. There's also inbound customer service. Now, these aren't your direct customers, but your vendors. And if you can have a more strategic, collaborative relationship with vendors, then in the long run, you can have a better relationship, talk about reducing costs, and improve your relationship to focus on the quality of the product and talk about other things with them other than freight. So there's a lot of value in setting up an inbound freight program. A lot of shippers just don't want to deal with it because it's seen as sort of a red-headed stepchild or a cost center. Let's flip that on its head. Let's give it value. Let's make it strategic, and let's work on streamlining that for you as a shipper and reducing your total costs when it comes to transportation. So we hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Talking Freight. As you know, we publish every single Friday. So make sure you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you get a notification by email when we do publish on Friday. And if you want to see more details about this subject or inbound freight in general, make sure you check out the description box in this YouTube video, and we'll have a link for you to not only the blog post, but also our inbound freight category so you can see all of our valuable and educational content as it relates to inbound freight. Thanks for tuning in this week. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.